This isn't a very interesting story to some, but I felt like I still had to share it. It's been bothering me for some time now. First, a little background. I go into work right around 2 p.m. and I get out at around 8:30 p.m. I always take the same route to go to and from work. Also, I've been working at this particular store for about 6 months. Well, one day, about a month and a half ago, I started feeling really weird while I was at work. Almost like I was there, my body was there, but my mind was somewhere else. It started about 2 hours before my shift ended. I thought, okay, kind of weird, but I was taking cold medicine at the time and figured that it was just messing with my head. That was until my drive home. On this particular night, I got out of work a little late. My DM came in because we had to unplug and shut down everything in the store so the city could do some kind of energy work or whatnot. I don't remember the details. I just know that if we didn't unplug everything, that it would get fried. So I'm driving home about 20 minutes later than usual, and my anxiety starts building to a point where I feel like I'm going to have a panic attack, and the feeling of being there but not there starts to get much worse. That's when I see it. As I said before, I take the same routes every day to and from work, but as I went down the road, I looked to my left and saw this big semiconductor plant all lit up that had never frickin' been there before. I pulled over on the side of the road, freaking out, not knowing what to think or do. I know for a fact that it had never been there before, and it's really hard to miss when you're driving. Driving home in complete darkness with a huge lit up power plant. You didn't even have to look for it. Couldn't have missed it. That's how big it was, and all of a sudden it's just there. I sat there for a minute until I calmed down a bit, trying to reassure myself that it had always been there. I just wasn't paying any attention to it, and that I'm not going crazy. I probably just hadn't seen it before, right? A few minutes later, my boyfriend called me and asked if I could pick up some McDonald's for him. Sure, no problem. I passed by one on my drive home. The feeling of anxiety and not being there started to fade until I pulled into the drive-thru, ordered my food, and then a worker I had never seen before was sitting at the front window. I asked him how long he'd been working there, and he said about 2 months now. It was at that point that I really began freaking out. I came to this place nearly every day for months at varying times throughout the day when I would arrive there. Even weirder yet, he was the only worker there that night. I'm sure there's an explanation for that part, but it sure didn't help me feel any better after discovering a new power plant just popped up out of nowhere about 20 minutes earlier. I proceeded to go home and have a full-blown panic attack, curled in a ball, shaking, crying, hyperventilating, the whole deal. I told my boyfriend about the power plant I'd seen, and he said, "Oh yeah, that's always been there. Have you not seen it before?" And now every day I look at that place and freak out a little bit every time that I pass by, because I know that it was never there before. Since then, I've noticed tiny little details about my life that are just slightly different. Like my dog not knowing tricks that she used to know since she was a pup, or my boyfriend pronouncing a few words differently than he did before. The only explanation that I can come up with is that I accidentally slipped into an alternate reality while on my drive home from work. Here is more details for clarity. I ended up calling the power plant in the city out of ignorance of what it was and got myself into some trouble for that one. Also, I didn't clarify the city name where I live and work for privacy reasons. Here's some more pictures that I took of that power plant when I drive by at night. You really can't see it that well, but believe me, in person, it's much more massive than this. So my fiance and I were doing some house cleaning today. My fiance goes to open the front door to toss a small dirty rug outside. I was watching him do this. When he opened the front door, it was completely black outside, even though it was 2 p.m., and our whole entrance area and living room is brightly lit because of the sunlight coming from the outside. Then the outside of the front door lit up instantly, and then it went dark again, and then finally the light once again came back on, as you would say, and it stayed like that. It reminded me of when a light bulb flickers just before it's about to burn out. You know how they look. I said to him, "Did you see that?" And he goes, "Yes, just what happened here. There weren't any clouds outside either, so we can't really blame it on large cloud cover in the area." I felt like I was in a video game that needed to load the environment, and the frames froze for a second while it was trying to load up. I've read stories like this before on Reddit and on other websites, and for me to experience this firsthand really tells me that this isn't mass hysteria or something that people are hallucinating about. This is real, and the chances that we are all living in some kind of a simulation or some kind of a computer program, albeit a very high-tech and elaborate one, shows that reality as we know it is far more different than we have originally been taught by the educational system and society. So this actually happened last week. It just took me some time to come to terms with it. I got a phone call from my next door neighbor later in the evening asking if I could help him move a mattress into his upstairs area. His mom is ill and has a big, heavy, deep sleep number bed. I, of course, ran over to help because they're great neighbors and I want to be a nice person. I get over there and his friend, who is also a priest, was there to help. I helped them figure out how to separate the mattress from the bed so we could lift it upstairs. We get it all moved up and back in place when my neighbor asks if I can help him move an armoire upstairs as well. I think nothing of it, and we pull it out of his travel trailer and start bringing it up the front stairs of the house. This is where I think I slipped or passed to the other side, or died, if you will. The front stairs are 11 steps. I was on the lower end of the armoire, about 6 steps up, when my neighbor and his friend lose a handle on the armoire, and it comes crashing down on me, and I fall backwards towards the pavement. I then wake up in my dining room to my phone ringing, and my wife asking me if I'm going to answer the phone. It's my neighbor asking me if I can come over to help him move the bed upstairs for his mom. I go over there and meet his priest friend again, as this has been the first time I met him, apparently. And I say that I can help out with the bed, but I cannot help with the armoire. My neighbor was like, "How'd you know about the armoire?" I then proceed to tell him that I'm pretty sure that I just died a few minutes ago at his house, moving that stupid thing up the stairs. I spent the next hour talking with the priest. He had so many questions about what I had just said. My neighbor didn't believe it until I described the upstairs bedroom in perfect details, down to the metal mattress frame on the floor and the intricate headboard leaning against the wall, and I was at no point, even though I had a good relationship with my neighbor, ever up in the upstairs portion of the house, and I was never anywhere inside the house. That was my first time ever going into the house. And how would I know what it looked like inside unless I had been there before and had this kind of an experience? The priest asked me what I saw after I died, and I told him that I never actually died before it happened, and that the only thing that I remember is that I woke up at my dining room table to the phone ringing, and that's how I came over. I experienced my death but woke up alive about 20 minutes earlier in my same life. Strange, but true. This one happened around last year, but it still puzzles me. So during my lunch break, I like to have lunch and then coffee in this restaurant that is 3 blocks away from my office. I had just left my office, so I thought, phew, I have 1 hour ahead to have lunch in peace. I don't like to eat in a hurry, so I was glad that I could have lunch quietly and then read my book while I had coffee afterwards. It was 12:05 p.m. I usually take 10 minutes walking to get to the restaurant, so it was enough time for me to eat, read, and go back to my office. As I walked, I realized my shoelaces were untied, so I stopped to tie my shoes. I sighed and looked at my clock, and it was 12:10 p.m. I remember looking at my clock because I always look at my clock when I have to stop to do anything when I'm walking on the street. It's just a habit that I have. It was a very hot summer day, and I don't know if that was because of the heat, but I felt a little bit dizzy and lightheaded. But it was nothing serious, and I didn't have to stop and take a breath or anything like that. I tied my shoes and checked the time again, and I couldn't believe it. It was 12:40 p.m. I remember saying out loud, "There's no effing way," and I said that out loud in the middle of the sidewalk with other people around me. I got really mad because now I wouldn't have as much time to eat or anything like that, and I was confused, and I didn't know what to think at that time. How do I go from looking at my clock at 12:10 p.m. to only having a few moments pass by to tie my shoe, looking back at my clock, and noticing that it's 12:40 p.m. There's no way that I would take 30 minutes to tie my shoes, not even if I went really, really slowly. I usually do things at a very, very fast pace, but I'm not sure if what I was feeling earlier, the dizziness, had anything at all to do with this. Perhaps it did, but I still think it's pretty weird for me to experience this, and it puzzles me to this day. For starters, this is my first post here, and I normally wouldn't post unless I thought this was something really, really strange, which it is. This is what happened the last night that I still can't explain. I was learning how to skateboard with two friends. My friend and I were about to skate down the street on our boards, which is slightly downhill, when a homeless man walked up to us. We chatted briefly, and the homeless man asked me if I had any money. I said that I didn't have any cash, but that my roommate made a bunch of homeless bags, and that I could run to my house and grab one really quickly. At this point, I had 1 foot on the board and 1 foot on the ground. There was a snowbank right next to me, so I would have to wedge the skateboard into the snowbank so it wouldn't have rolled down the hill. I was right next to it. It was the obvious choice. I was right across from my house, so I ran in and grabbed the bags, which were right next to the front door. This whole thing took about 20 seconds. I come out, give the homeless man my bags, and immediately look down, and I say to myself, "Where's my board?" My friends looked confused and said that they did not know, but they just saw me on it. The homeless man also said that he didn't see it. We thought maybe that the homeless guy took it, but it was a whole skateboard, and he would have had to have used both hands to open up the bags to look through them and hold it at the same time, which would have been impossible. Plus, he was standing right in front of my friends and I the whole time. And it was 1 a.m. and it was dead outside. The only other thing that happened was that a car passed while I was inside. So they thought maybe somebody grabbed it really quickly from the car and stole it. However, that would have been pretty hard to do, and I think it's highly unlikely that that happened. We looked for it for about 20 minutes. We looked down the street in case it rolled and nobody noticed. And we were stumped. I asked them a million times if they were messing with me, and they sincerely promised that they weren't. And we were all just confused at the time, not knowing where else to look. It was also my friend's board, which was really concerning because it was a very expensive board that he had. I told him that it was probably a glitch in the Matrix, and that I wouldn't be surprised if that board showed up today. Sure enough, my friend leaves this morning, calls me and says, "I've closed the loop in the Matrix. I was walking in my car this morning up the road, and the skateboard was right next to the dumpster. The dumpster was up the road, which was uphill, and we weren't anywhere near the uphill portion of our neighborhood during this conversation. I still have absolutely no idea how it got there, and how nobody noticed it move in the 20 seconds that I was gone. My niece, my mom, and myself were about to have breakfast. My mom came with all the food, 2 big and 1 small forks, and 2 knives. My niece was very happy to have a big fork on her own plate and took one, and I took one too. My mom left for the other room to grab her phone and didn't touch the table at all after she left to do that. My niece was cutting her food and she couldn't cut the food that she had into smaller pieces. After she tried, she gave up and turned to me and asked me if I could cut the food into smaller pieces, and I said, "Yeah, give me your fork and knife." She gave me the knife and I said, "Where is your fork?" And she said, "It's in my hand." And I looked down at her hand, but she wasn't holding the fork. She said that she was confused and she asked me if I took the fork while she wasn't looking. And I told her that I would never do that. I was confused as well, and we searched every corner of the room, but we couldn't find that stupid fork anywhere. I turned to my mom and asked if she had seen the fork at all, and she just pretended not to hear me and just kept messing around with her phone. I asked 3 times and she got mad at me. She said, "It's in front of you," and when I turned, I saw 2 small forks on the table. I asked my niece if she saw these forks before, and she said, "Only the small one. I took one big one, and you took the other one," she said. My mom didn't answer us when we asked her again, pretending not to hear us. My niece took a small fork, and my mom cut her food. We were confused, and we searched around a little bit more, but we couldn't find it anywhere, and we've never seen that fork again. It's kind of weird how things just kind of disappear sometimes out of our reality for no reason. 4.5 years ago, I had a job selling cookies and fudge to tourists in my city. Occasionally, someone would come into the shop drunk to flirt with me, but not very often, as I was this awkward 20-year-old with bad acne and a terrible sense of humor. One memorable evening, a much older gentleman entered, and I offered him a small sample of fudge as I was required to do. He looked like he could have been in his mid-50s with energy of a 30-year-old. He had a thick frame with thick white hair, a narrow face, and piercing eyes. It felt like he was hitting on me, and it was very confusing. He was older, flamboyant, and he wanted me to show him around, quote-unquote. He asked me when I would be getting off work that night. I had neither the social skills nor the confidence to tell him to F off. I agreed to meet him after work and wondered if I was actually going to show him around town, and if that meant something more than my innocent mind was willing to believe at that time. Feeling kind of frightened and helpless at the same time, I told my male coworker what had just happened, and he told me that he would walk me to my car after work so that I could tell that white-haired man just never mind and to just leave me alone. Truth be told, I didn't expect the white-haired man to be waiting for me outside several hours later, but he was there. My coworker walked me out of the building, and as we hurried past, I looked at him and said, "Sorry, I can't. I just can't." The man bowed his head low and nodded as if he fully understood. He seemed deeply disappointed, though. Fast forward a year later, and I'm working at a new job in the same area. I had been there for about a month when a new face entered the scene. They hired a young man with a thick frame and thick dark hair, a narrow face, and piercing eyes. The young man was flirtatious, intense, and just my type. He was fun and flamboyant, and we were almost dating really fast, but I had to put the brakes on it for personal reasons. I was deeply upset about it for a long time. He used to talk to me a lot, and he was the first guy that I ever met that really liked me back seriously. I know logically that they are 2 different people, one an older guy looking to have a good time, and one a young man who I now miss a lot. Sometimes I choose to believe that it was a time traveler, and that this is some kind of a crazy story about a time traveler, because if it could be true, it means that he missed me too. I live an hour away from my old hometown, so I call my mom every 2 weeks to discuss the news about everyone that I don't see often. Before summer started, I called her and asked about my sister. She told me her dog, whose name is Honey, had unfortunately passed away. I was so upset about this news, as she was a wonderful sheepdog with so much personality that I really bonded with for many years. I remember shedding tears about it, and after I got off the phone, I told my boyfriend about how upset I was to hear the news. I then called my sister and we reminisced about her dog and talked about where she was burying her, etc., and how her son was really sad. Fast forward to Thanksgiving at my parents' house a couple of weeks ago. My sister and her husband had gone out of state to spend the holidays with her in-laws, so she left her dog with my parents to watch while they were away. I walked into my parents' house only to find the dog, Honey, healthy as can be, sitting in a dog bed in my parents' living room. I immediately bristled as I was shocked. I laid on the floor to give her a whole bunch of love and asked my mom why she had told me that Honey had passed away. She had no idea when I heard that and didn't know what I was talking about. I was floored, just laying there petting her and just loving her and just being there in total disbelief, not believing what I was seeing. I took her outside and threw the ball at her for about 30 minutes at least, probably longer. When my boyfriend and I were driving home, I mentioned it to him, and he said that he was glad that I brought it up because he absolutely remembers me discussing it with him, and he knows that I would never make something like that up, ever in my life. My father unexpectedly passed away 6 months before I graduated from high school. This was about a year ago, and his unexpected passing took a very heavy toll on me, and it resonated with me for years. A few years after he passed, I was driving in town and took a left turn down this street. After I turned onto this new street, everything suddenly started to feel desolate. This street is a one-way, two-lane road with me in the left lane. After making the turn, I noticed a truck in the right-hand lane stop at a red light roughly a block down the street. It's the only other vehicle there. As I get closer, I see that it's a very old Toyota pickup truck from the early 1980s. The exact same model and color as my dad's. This truck was beyond rare due to its age, and as I come closer to the stoplight, this intense feeling comes over me that it's him driving it. As I come close to the red light and make a full stop, I look to my right, and my dad is in the driver's seat of the truck, and he's simply just staring forward, not looking at me at all. I then quickly turn my head forward, and I say to myself, what did I just see? This can't be happening. And I quickly pull ahead, completely bewildered, and turn on to another street. To this day, I cannot explain what happened, and have searched everywhere to see if anybody has ever experienced something similar to me, but it's been an unsuccessful search. So here's some background on this story I'm about to tell. I was trying to get over an ex at that time, and my friend Maggie randomly texted me saying, "Hey, would you oppose going on a date with Audrey?" Audrey is a mutual friend, and I say, no. So I tried to talk to her, but I don't feel any sparks at all. No chemistry. The next day I tried to ask a group of friends to hang out. There's one girl in the group, and one of my other friends in the group texted me saying, "Dude, stop hitting on Alexandra. Focus on Audrey." And I'm like, huh? Later that day I was spaced out at a traffic light. My mind had just wandered for some reason, but I was completely sober. When the truck in front of me turned right, and I automatically think, well, the truck turned right, so it must be a green light. So I press on the gas and go ahead, and then I hear some light honking but ignore it. I was halfway through the intersection when I realized that the light was red, and for some reason I just stopped. I then hear a car behind me swerve so they don't hit me. So I keep on going and had to stop on the side of the road to process what had just happened to me. This is when things get weird. My friends never mention Audrey to me again, and a month later she starts dating somebody else, Jake, so I assume that was why. However, a few months later I bring up to Maggie about how she tried to set me up with Audrey, but when I did this she just stared at me blankly and says, "No, we were trying to set her up with Jake." I thought she was pulling my chain, but I went back to old text messages and couldn't find any that mentioned Audrey in the first place, let alone friends trying to hook me up with her. The weird thing about this experience is I didn't black out at all, and I was conscious the whole time, so I don't know if I passed away and just switched to some other reality through death, but I know very well that I wasn't imagining this at all. Also, Maggie claimed that she had been having consistent dreams of me dying, and they stopped when this event happened. A reality shift is the only thing that I can come up with to explain why things seem different in my life now. This happened after I graduated high school in 2012. I was staying with my grandparents, and I asked my grandpa to use his car so that I could get a haircut. On my way back, I was sitting at a light waiting for the turn arrow and was first in line to turn. As the arrow turned green, I heard a woman's voice in my head that said, "Don't go." It caught my attention to where I ended up being stunned for a second, wondering what just happened. So I waited a second or two longer, holding up traffic, still trying to figure out the oddity of hearing someone else's voice in my head. And that was the real reason that I waited. Otherwise, I would have been a goner, because I would have turned at that green light. But instead, I waited about 3 to 5 seconds. And as I waited, I saw a semi-truck couldn't stop and ended up in the middle of the intersection when it finally did. It was a sloped highway coming off a bridge. Hearing that voice when I did saved my life, as it kept me from getting into a horrific accident that would have taken my life. I can't imagine what would have happened to my family and loved ones had they had to hear the bad news of my passing. However, I always think about that voice in my head and the great advice it gave me. Always pay attention to yourself and your intuition. You never know, it might save you the way it saved me. It was about a year ago, and I was driving home from work listening to some music. And as usual, I was daydreaming during the ride, but one of my daydreams seemed a bit odd and random. It was a vivid picture of my sister, and I'm waking her up and her husband in the middle of the night because their dog was profusely vomiting everywhere. It didn't sit well with me, so I texted my sister asking if her dog was okay, and she said yes and asked why. So I explained what happened and what I was thinking about, the whole daydream. She laughed and told me to F off and that her dog was fine. So I carried on with my day, and I just finished off the night by going to sleep after work. But as I wake up in the morning, I had several missed calls and text messages from her at about 3 a.m. that they needed to take the dog to the vet because he had been profusely vomiting. She told me that I'm cursed. This isn't the first time something like this has happened to me, but that's why I made this post, because it's so strange. Anyways, I want to know if anybody else had experienced a similar type of coincidence as me, and if they also thought that it was a glitch. I ordered groceries today for delivery because of this whole lockdown that's still on. Everything was there except for one item, some fresh fish that was in a paper bag. I flagged the delivery driver down before he leaves and asked if he could check the back of his truck, but there was nothing there. I wished him well and gave him a tip for his troubles, and he said that he needed to go on his way. No one had been in my apartment other than me, and I hadn't taken anything out of the bag at that point. But as I went back inside to my place of living, my fish is sitting on the opposite side on the other end of the kitchen, completely away from the rest of the grocery bags. I'm convinced that this delivery boy was some kind of a wizard. And what's strange is that he had a certain vibe about him too. I ended up prepping the fish, cooking it, and eating it, and it was delicious. So I thank that wizard delivery boy for the fish. And I like to say a lot of the times I read about these glitches and they're kind of frightening or a bit scary. However, not all glitches can be. I guess it just depends on the person having the experience and how they see it. This happened at the Woodland Hills Mall in Tulsa, Oklahoma, November the 23rd of 2020, around 6 p.m. or so. My husband and I were completely sober as usual, and we took our 2 kids, our baby and a school-aged child, to JCPenney's in the mall. Due to the lockdown, if there are more than 2 entrances to a store, they block off all the entrances but one. This JCPenney's had a top-level and bottom-level entrance because it was inside of a mall on the 1st and 2nd floor. And we had been going to this mall and this JCPenney store since we were kids, and none of the areas inside of the store have changed at all since we were younger. We were on the top floor, the 2nd floor when we went in, and PacSun was on the outside of the store as usual. The display was a white soft sweater on the left and softer tones on the other side, and I touched one of them and I commented on it. We walked around the left side of the store to the back to find the single tiny elevator that could only fit one family. We got in and hit the button for floor 1, and there was only 2 buttons. Floor 1 and floor 2. There were no buttons to other numbered floors in that building. We got out on floor 1, where the shoes are, to the left, and I decided that I wanted to find another store as none of the snow boots fit our oldest child. We walked a few feet back to the elevator that was literally only a few feet from the shoe area, so we could see the entire time, and we got in to hit the button, number 2, to head back up to the floor so we could exit floor 1, which had an entrance that was closed off and gated and everything else because of the lockdown. Then the elevator moved, and as we went up, it opened up to a totally different part of the store from where we originally entered. It was the home decor, and none of the clothes racks that had been there upon the first entrance on the 2nd floor were there. We felt uneasy as everybody in the store was silent and everything was still, and it just seemed like everybody was staring at us the entire time. Then we were even more freaked out to find out that where our exit should have been, there was this gate and closed off portion of the store. We walked back to the same little elevator after that. We got on and hit floor 1 again, and it opened to where we had been with the shoes on the left. But this time it was like some kind of a weird combination of the original floor 2 when we first entered and floor 1, as halfway through we saw the display and layout that we had seen upon the entrance on floor 2 when we first arrived at JCPenney, with that sweater on the left, but there was now a green and red sign with different colors and designs on it. The entrance was completely open, as if it had been switched, and we felt this complete dread and utter silence, and there was just more stairs. We exited past Starbucks on the first level totally confused because everything felt off and everything looked different. The entrance was completely open as if it had been switched, and we still felt completely confused about everything, and there was a sense of dread and utter silence as everybody was staring at us again. We exited past Starbucks on the first level totally confused. My husband said he felt like something shifted as we walked away from the store. People stopped staring and the mall was loud again, and when we took the mall middle elevator outside of JCPenney's to get back to the 2nd level of the mall itself to head to the other stores on that floor, I felt completely terrified to see that the gate to JCPenney's was open on level 2. The display was the original white sweater looking downstairs, and the gate was closed from my vantage point on that first floor as I looked down those stairs that we had just exited out of. It was honestly the creepiest things, or one of the creepiest things I'd ever experienced. We got our kids' boots, and we got them from this children's place, and left looking at the JCPenney in the distance. The second of our kids fell asleep in the car as we kept talking about it. And I told my husband, I said, "You saw that too, right?" And he confirmed everything that I had seen. So I knew that I wasn't crazy. And it was almost like we walked into some kind of a different reality or some kind of a different place where it was similar to our world, but not really. That's when I found this forum about these glitch stories and decided to post my story here, as I know now that I'm not alone.